and welcome back to Coven, Season 1, Episode 2. I'm super excited to be here, and you might notice that things look a little bit different. For one, I moved to San Francisco, so we're here in San Francisco at Hyde Street Studios, which is amazing and incredible. And for two, this is not Reilly.
Hello.
This is Coco. Reilly has some amazing things happening in her life and felt like she needed to focus on that. So she stepped away from the podcast, and almost at the same time, I met Coco through our master's program that we're both attending. And it just was the perfect fit, and everything felt really good. So I'll let Coco introduce herself.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. By the way, thank you so much for including me in such a fun, exciting, creative project. My name is Socorro, Carillo-Lopez, but like Jenna said, you can call me Coco. And yeah, meeting you, I feel, was serendipitous and synchronistic and kind of, our... when we looked at our charts, they're very similar.
We're both a Sagittarius sun with a Leo rising, and I feel like that's a really big thing because that puts both of our suns in the 5th house of creative expression and play, and also to be a Leo rising means that we're both ruled by the sun. So that feels really aligned. And then you have a lot in your 9th house too, right?
I only have Chiron in my 9th house. Well, in my midheaven, yeah.
And what about your 3rd house?
My 3rd house, I have Uranus.
Oh, right.
No, I'm sorry. Pluto is in my 3rd house. Ooh. Uranus is in my 4th house. I know.
Okay, sick.
Intense.
Yeah. Well, it was. It did feel really aligned. What's like? Can you say a little bit about your background and what brought you here?
Sure. I've actually been a hairdresser for a long time. I have Venus in my 6th
and
house.
an astrologer.
Yes.
A hairdresser and an astrologer.
Yes. I'm also an astrologer. I also read tarot. I've been obsessed with basically healing, and tarot and astrology have been crucial for me during this path, and it just kind of led me to wanting to be an astrologer. And so that's pretty much what I do now, as well as some hair. I'm trying to transition, but
Yeah, meeting Coco it felt so synchronistic, and like, okay, this is the person that I've been looking for forever. And we're still Reilly, this is not a permanent thing with Reilly. Not that Coco's a permanent thing. Reilly being gone is not a permanent thing. So whenever Reilly returns, I'm excited to incorporate her back into all of this as well.
Yeah.
But
we also have someone else.
Yeah, Coco also introduced another perfect person who's now our lovely producer
slash director
slash missing person. Piece that is so essential. And her name's Sierra. Sierra, do you want to come introduce yourself?
Yay! This is Sierra.
Hi. I'm Sierra. I met Coco at Berkeley. We both studied gender and women's studies together. I'm super into any kind of media that kind of pushes back against paradigm thinking or kind of a binary way of viewing the world. So when Coco told me about this opportunity, I was super excited, and then I met Jenna, and it felt right. And when something feels right, you should just do it. So I'm super excited, and I know what's going to happen. So
she's the only one who does, really.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have been here on our previous season. The format is each of the hosts comes prepared with another person that they've researched, and the other host doesn't know who we've brought to the table, who we're going to invite or welcome into our coven. And Sierra is the perfect middle ground for that. So Sierra knows who both of us have researched.
And it's going to be exciting. So well, I'll let you guys go.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's going to be our magic moment for this week, for the first episode, is just all of this beginning in such a perfect aligned way. But the next part of the show, if you've been with us before, you'll remember. If not, I'll give a quick explanation. We introduce the birth chart of the person that we are going to share their story of. And Coco's going to look at this person's birth chart. She doesn't know who I am covering or who I'm welcoming into the coven. And she's going to give a little blind birth chart reading. So here we go. This is their natal chart. Okay. And for those of you who are not watching this, we'll on the YouTube, on the video, we're going to post this chart as well, so you'll see it. But if you're just listening with us, can you give just like a brief little, maybe just like what planets, kind of what you're looking at?
Yeah, I'll just tell you certain things that are standing out to me first. Well, first of all, is this like their actual birth time?
Oh yeah, I guess I should clarify. This is definitely their birthday. I'm pretty confident in their birth, not exact time, but I'm pretty confident that they're an Aquarius rising because of transits that I mapped out in their life and things that fall in like a crazy way.
Okay. Yeah. It's so. I'll just say what stands out to me from the get-go is their Sun, Neptune, and Mercury and Virgo in their 8th house. And then do you want me to kind of like explain the significations of...
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the Sun is our destiny. Neptune is the planet of dreams, fantasies, imagination, creativity. And then Mercury is the planet of communication and also the trickster. And another thing that I'm noticing is that Mercury is at 28 degrees of Virgo, so there's probably an orb that has something to do with Libra, which is the house right next to their Mercury, where their Mercury is. And let's see. Also this tight orb right here with Pluto and Venus in their 6th house in Cancer, and Chiron as well. So Pluto is the planet of transformation, the underworld. Basically, whatever it touches, it completely transforms. And Venus, the planet of beauty, love, relationships, aesthetics. And then Chiron at 0 degrees in Cancer in their 6th house, the wounded healer, and which is on the cusp also of their 5th house. And then as far as, let's see, what else am I seeing here? Oh, yeah, Mars and Sagittarius in their 11th house. Mars is the planet of heating things up, speeding things along, battles, wars. And then they have Jupiter in the 12th house in Capricorn. And then the other thing I'm noticing too, sorry, there's a lot here. There's a lot of
little things. And I feel like their chart, I feel like it's sort of a tricky one to interpret their personality based off of until you hear the story, and then it makes a lot of sense. So I'm curious what you see, what you would think of as this person's personality based on this.
Well, I think, first of all, there's probably some sort of creativity around taboo subjects, maybe the occult, in a very organized, perfectionistic way.
Yeah.
And then also, let's see here. Interesting. Also, the conjunction in Aries, Saturn, and
I think that's Eris.
Oh, okay.
If I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I don't work a ton with Eris, so I'm not like I know basics about it. But yeah, if you're familiar, feel free. But
barely, I'm barely familiar with the stars. I would like to be more familiar with the stars. And then Uranus and their moon in Taurus. So I'm assuming as well, like some kind of hardship or disruption when they were young, growing up, maybe with the father, that I don't know, has something, it makes them, is connected to their emotions, and maybe some, I'm looking at their Jupiter and Capricorn in the 12th house, maybe some depression or transcendence of some kind. Am I getting warm?
Very, yeah, pretty hot actually.
Yeah, and then as far as some of the aspects go, it looks like, just because we've been I'm learning 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see here. So we got 1, 2. Okay, no, 1, 2, 3, 4. What was 4 again?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't think I've got to this part in our class. For the aspects, or
I'm
or like the numerology.
Well, the aspects. I think also because we probably have I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at different charts from different software, it's kind of like
It's
reorienting.
This is a new software that I started using because everybody at school uses it.
Oh, you're gonna have to tell me what it is. Yeah,
it's Astro Gold. Sorry to.
Oh, I have Astro Gold, but I don't use it as much as I use
free promo
ephemeris. Yeah,
you're welcome. Astro Gold, sponsor us.
Yeah. So, and then as far as the Mars up here, or as far as Mars up here in their 11th house with their North Node, something about intense initiatory truth seeking, but like trailblazing maybe, or I don't know. Yeah. So
yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, that was really good. Very, very, very accurate, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah. Should we? Should I? Are you ready for me to tell you who this is?
I really want to know who this is.
Okay. So, let me grab my notes and make sure I have all of this ready.
I'm dying to find out.
So for our first episode of Coven Season 2, I'm welcoming musician, composer, multi-instrumentalist, singer, and Swamini, which means Hindu spiritual leader or matriarch, Alice Coltrane, otherwise known as Swamini Turiyasangitinanda, into our coven.
Oh, okay.
Are you familiar with Alice at all?
Well, the name sounds very familiar, but a musician, obviously, right?
Associated with John Coltrane.
Okay. I was wondering. Okay.
Wife of John Coltrane.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, second wife of John Coltrane. Yeah, and her legacy's largely been defined by that and overshadowed by her marriage to John Coltrane, who's obviously legendary genius, trailblazing avant-garde jazz musician, arguably is like one of the most, if not the most important figure of that time period for jazz. And
wow, and I said the word trailblazing.
No, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's John, and she is that as well, and together they were that, and the stuff that she did on her own was that, and she's just largely overshadowed, and she actually had a lot of heat on her. I think she had what I read as like the Yoko effect.
Oh, yes,
because
I know exactly
when
what
she
that is,
entered his life, a lot of things shifted, and a lot of blame was put on her for things ending, and
it always gets put on the women.
yeah, unfortunately. So I really wanted to just tell her story to the best of my abilities, and get her message out, because she was incredible, and she has so many sides to her that I hadn't really ever heard of her. I knew she was a musician. I knew she was married to John Coltrane, but I came across a video of her playing harp, and I was like, okay, this is the person for Coven.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So she lived an incredible, full, impactful and influential life, and remains an inspiration to creatives of all kinds, not to mention the various spiritual communities that she established during her time on Earth. And I also wanted to point out another thing about being an Aquarius rising. Her 10th house is in Scorpio. So literally the house of like public image and reputation, and the way that you are presented in the world is with a shadow of Scorpio. It's like expressing through the shadow.
Yeah.
which is super interesting.
Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Scorpio's significations, Scorpios are usually holding their cards close to their chest. They don't really make any moves until they know all of the information. But I've heard Scorpio people with Scorpio in their charts as kind of digging through the mud and going into the underworld, and a lot of shadow archetypes around them.
Yeah, shadowy elements. There's a lot, and actually her midheaven is in Sagittarius in her 11th house, but her 10th house is still like public image, and even though it's empty, just the fact that it's in Scorpio I think is interesting with the Scorpio relating to the shadow, and her literally being in the world in a shadow of someone else.
Wow, that's crazy.
But
is it?
Is it? Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about her life. We'll start off in childhood. So she was born as Alice Lucille McLeod in Detroit, Michigan, and she was the fifth of six siblings. And she was raised in a super musical family, so she grew up playing in churches in Detroit with her siblings. And I don't know about the father. I couldn't find anything like a ton of information on her parents. I think they did divorce. So I'm sure there's something there. But I think both of her parents, and maybe it was her dad, that pushed her into music. But their whole family was just super musical, and so they were all kind of growing up around it. She began to study piano in Oregon when she was 7.
Wow.
And she focused on classical and jazz. And later on, she would learn percussion and eventually her favorite, which was the harp. She also sang and led a lot of bands, Detroit-based jazz ensembles.
So really fast, you had said something earlier about, did you say like a spiritual movement? Or?
Yeah, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
a lot of what you said. There, like the spiritual side of her is like arguably the biggest, most important side to her.
Wow, the biggest. Jupiter, interesting.
Yeah,
in Capricorn too.
Yeah,
crazy.
like her whole life's message and her whole life's work is about the spiritual side of it, and music was like a medium for her to express it and to work with it, I guess, to embody it. But yeah, she was an incredible musician. She became a successful bebop pianist in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
She was a band leader, and she ended up moving to Paris in 1960, where she married her first husband, jazz singer Kenny Pancho Haygood.
What a name.
Yeah, and I didn't
Haygood.
listen to any of his music, but I probably should. I was focused on her. So.
Right.
And she had a daughter with him, Michelle. Unfortunately, he struggled with heroin addiction, and she filed for divorce, I think, the same year, and moved back to the States with their daughter. And in 1962, she was in New York City, I think playing some shows or something, and she meets John Coltrane. And they instantly hit it off, have this insane connection that just feels heaven sent and super divine. And she says of this, she says, "Before I even met him and became a part of the group and part of his life, there was something in me that knew there was a spiritual, musical connection, a divine connection with this person, because there were things that he said to me. They weren't spoken with the human voice."
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so they were married in Mexico in 1965, and John adopted her daughter, Michelle, and not long after she gave birth to 3 sons, but in the span of like 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
Because they were married in 1965, and he ended up passing away in 1967.
Wow, so they weren't married for very long at all.
No. 3 sons in that time and a daughter is crazy to me. I was like reading this and I was like, how did they have time? How does this
Wait,
align?
that doesn't
Yeah.
compute.
But
it's possible.
yeah. And in 1966, so they had this really intense spiritual connection. Musically, they just understood one another. John was already introducing a spiritual side to his music. John was actually addicted to heroin in the let's see, not in the 30s. He would have been a child. When he was, because she was born in 1937. I think he was born in 1926, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it was in his 20s. He was addicted to heroin, had like a lot of really like dark nights of the soul, close to death moments, and had a big epiphany, spiritual awakening moment with it. And he became really interested in all kinds of religions and spirituality.
I did not know that about him.
Yeah, and he started really wanting to incorporate it into his music. It was always a spiritual thing for him. I think when you're just that talented of a musician, you're just in this place of there is no difference between what you're creating and this divinity that's coming through you. Yeah, it's like some people are just made in a certain way that they're tools to produce this.
And the fact that they found each other and that he felt that she understood him, to me is huge, because his music is so complex. I'm assuming that he was complex as a person as well.
So complex that of the John Coltrane quartet, that was like the quartet, it was like this massive ensemble. When he started going in that direction, his band members started to quit. Beginning with McCoy Tyner, who was the pianist in the quartet. Things started going a little too avant-garde, a little too weird, and he felt...
For them, they didn't want this. They don't want the spiritual.
He felt that he didn't... Well, I think he just felt... I think what I read is that he just felt that he couldn't contribute anymore. He wasn't a good fit. And some people seemed to say he didn't like that he couldn't hear his own part anymore. So he didn't feel like he was getting enough of like a showcase. You know, like I guess in a lot of jazz ensembles, it's like showcasing the instrumentalist. And I think where John was going was like, it's not about the musician. It's not about the artist. It's about the thing that we're creating. And we'll get into that in a second on why that was so important to him. But he introduced Alice when they met to Eastern spirituality. And the two of them would meditate and engage in all these spiritual practices all the time.
Wow.
And she ended up replacing McCoy Tyner as the pianist in the John Coltrane Quartet in 1966.
Oh, wow.
And
so like a year before he died.
Yeah. And she ended up playing in a lot of their shows and on their records. But like I said earlier, her joining and marrying John had this Yoko Ono effect, where the John Coltrane Quartet fans would blame her for breaking up the band and for the unusual shift in musical direction.
Because it had nothing to do with him. It was all her. She just came in and swooped in. And
she happens to be this...
so powerful.
Yeah, which she is. But he was already there. He was already shifting his direction. These people were already not going to be staying. It was the natural flow of things. And they ended up actually being a really powerful team together. Of John's music and with the spirituality thing, he's quoted to say, I want to be the force which is truly for good. I'd like to point out to people the divine in a musical language that transcends words. I want to speak to their souls.
Wow.
And he often would have like diagrams of like Pythagorean charts.
Wow.
Yeah, and he believed that he could genuinely heal people if he just found the right combination of tones.
Oh my gosh.
To use.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Because that's I mean right now that's being spoken about so much is like frequencies and tones and how that those can heal.
Totally.
And so he already knew
He was already there.
Wow.
Already there. And he was studying like the depths of it. Like he wasn't just like, oh, like I heard this, if you play this frequency, it means this. He was like figuring that out by like doing the math of it and like going to like studying philosophy and all different world religions to get there. And also the reason I'm talking about John so much, because normally in these episodes, when there's a man involved in the person's life, I don't want to talk about the man at all.
Yeah.
Because it's not about them. It's about our person that we're inviting into our coven. But everything that I read and all the interviews that I was watching with Alice, she speaks of him so highly and credits him so much, and
So to leave him out of it would be
a disservice, I think, because he is a big part of her story, and she has been overshadowed, but she doesn't ever say, like, I think she said once that she doesn't need to be his equal, and in these tribute shows, she's not trying to like show her own stuff or like make herself known as an equal to him, because nothing will match like what he brought to the table. She has her own thing that she does, and she's secure in that, and she's okay with that.
Right.
She's his partner, but she feels very much connected to him. So that's why I'm speaking of him.
That's
also
beautiful. That's true love.
I think so.
True soul connection.
True soul connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Alice says of his music, she said, I didn't have to inspire John toward the avant-garde. He did not need anything from me. That's why it's so interesting that critics decided to dislike me. At some point, the members of the quartet felt it was time for a change and left on their own.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me how easily blame gets put on a woman for just anything going awry in some way. It must be her. It must be her.
And it's funny because it's not even that it was like degrading, or it's not like it was going awry. Like it was going awry because it was changing.
Right.
But just how people get so stuck in their idea of what they want something to be, and and when it changes, it must be a downgrade. And
right. Well, only if a woman is involved.
Right, exactly.
If there's a man that's involved, then it's just a change.
It's avant-garde.
Yeah.
it's going places.
Interesting, because I don't know why I didn't say death and dying in the eighth house. I wasn't thinking about that, but now I'm looking at that Neptune sun and especially in the eighth house, which is because every house or every sign corrects the sign of the house before. So the seventh house was her relationship with him, and then her eighth house was the legacy that was left out.
Good point. And there's more. Just wait. Okay. Just wait. You're spot on with that.
Yay.
And of their home growing up, Michelle, I think this is from Michelle, one of her children, remarks that their home together was just full of religious, philosophical, and spiritual texts, and they would honor the truth in each of them. So even though Alice came from Detroit, growing up Christian in churches, playing in music, playing gospel music, that's like her foundation, she also had this other side of her that incorporated all religions and all different branches of spirituality and philosophies, and they were both super interested in all of it. And so she would use terms like God, but you'll see later on she ends up becoming Hindu, converting to Hinduism and becoming a big Hindu leader. And that's just crazy to me. I'm getting ahead of myself because this is like more of like the last part of it, but it's really interesting to notice or to pay attention to that. We talked about Pythagoras already, but John was a follower of Pythagoras. He was obsessed with Pythagoras, apparently. Pythagoras was the Greek philosopher who believed that the universe followed sacred mathematical laws that could be discovered in musical chord structures.
Wow.
And Pythagoreans also believed that music has a magical power to soothe the soul, just as Orpheus's harp could soothe wild beasts. And this, from this article by Jules Evans, he says maybe that's why in his final tour, Coltrane went to play Peace on Earth at Nagasaki, the site of one of the atomic bombs that the U.S. dropped on Japan, because maybe he wanted to cleanse.
Oh, that makes me like want to cry. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also interesting, I think, probably because of his curiosity of Pythagoras, he really wanted a harp. He's got really into this idea of a harp. So in 1967, he purchased this harp. Custom, took several months to build, and unfortunately he died. He passed away of liver cancer before it arrived, which left Alice there with their 4 young kids, 1967. This was also during her Saturn return. I have the chart for his death.
Oh, wow.
Wait till you see this chart. But before we get there, yeah, she ended up getting this harp, and she said, if the windows were open, oh, sorry, this is a piece from the New Yorker, says, if the windows were open, Alice later recalled, a strong breeze would make the strings of the harp hum as though some invisible force, not a horse, a force, as though some invisible force were strumming them.
Wow. That is so amazing. I mean, it just makes me think about, like, you know, everything that we're learning about synchronicities and the, you know, the environment around us, things that, you know, change and come into our environment, and we, you know, just like to say, oh, it's just a coincidence. But is it?
Never. I mean, maybe sometimes. That's a whole other philosophical discussion to go down. Is everything a synchronicity? Is everything intentional? Or there's some things that are and some things that are not?
Yeah, that's true.
I go back and forth.
I would like to believe that it was him coming to visit.
Oh yeah,
her.
for sure. In this situation, definitely intentional, if you ask me. And yeah, so the harp very quickly became her instrument of choice, and her primary medium for expressing the divine through sound. And that is incredible on its own. But you also have to think about the fact that harp in jazz music. When?
Yeah.
Who?
I never would have thought about it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I haven't done too much research down this lane of things. But if I'm not mistaken, she's like the main person to introduce harp into jazz, into the world of jazz. It's not a thing in jazz music.
Yeah.
And she brought it. And not to mention also, for a Black woman to be a harpist, that also didn't really exist. That was like a huge revolutionary thing. And so there's a lot of people who she's considered to be really avant-garde in the world of jazz, in the world of harp. And
so she was unapologetically being herself.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the
Sagittarius.
Yeah, so she loved the harp, and of playing the harp, she said in this documentary, there's a few documentaries I watched that are great. Highly recommend if you're interested, listeners, if you're interested.
Yes.
There's a documentary called Love Supreme, which Love Supreme was John Coltrane's final album. I believe final album, but it's considered to be like his most prolific, and they were together at the time. And anyway, she's in this documentary, and she's speaking of the harp, and she says, "It makes me recall ancient Egypt. It makes me seem to remember that I have a past or history there somewhere."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I guess next I want to talk about post John's death.
Okay.
Because in a lot of ways, I think this was her initiation. You talked about initiations, things, and she would call it that as well. It was extremely significant for her. Obviously, this is her like soulmate, father of her children. Haven't even been together that long. He was only 40 when he died, and she was 30.
And they had only been together for
something.
a couple of years.
Only been together a couple of years. Yeah, obviously so tragic, but it truly sent her into a dark night of soul, psychosis, a spiritual emergency. She was hallucinating. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She lost all this weight. She got so disassociated from her body. There's a story where she didn't feel like she was connected or in her body at all, and she put her hand on a burning stove and just left it there until her nails started turning black and her skin started curling, and until she finally was like, oh, I shouldn't do that. But yeah, you can see in like videos of her playing the harp later on, just the 3rd-degree burns on her hand still. So I wanted to look at the birth chart of that, or the transit chart for that. This is the day that John died, so July 17th, 1967. Look at this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
this blew my mind when I was, and this is one of the reasons why I chose her as an Aquarius rising. But there's another chart that also supports that. But this one would put Pluto at 18 degrees in her 8th house, conjunct her natal Neptune at 18 degrees. So You can maybe talk to a little bit about why that's so significant.
Well, so Pluto, obviously, like I was saying before, is the planet of transformation, but it's also the planet of the underworld. And then Neptune is the planet of, it's a planet of dreams and imagination, but it's also confusion.
Hallucinations,
yes,
psychosis,
altered perceptions of reality. A lot of times, when I think about Neptune, I think about alcohol or drugs, but I also think about just not being able to see clearly what I'm looking at.
And the 8th house is significant on so many layers here. It's also like there's not just Pluto there, but Uranus is also there. It's like pretty close to that Pluto-Uranus conjunction.
So disruption, chaos.
Yeah. And her Juno is also there, conjunct her natal sun. Juno is the asteroid for marriage and commitment.
Oh, so the death of marriage and
death
commitment.
Of marriage, literally conjunct
right
her
on her
sun.
sun. Yeah.
Exactly conjunct at 4 degrees. And the 8th house is the house of deeper commitments, emotional commitment and intimacy, but it's also the house of mental health and your inner demons.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's the house of like when you have things going through your 8th house, a lot of the time you're going to start therapy or you're going to have this really deep like shadow work that you have to do. But it's also this like shared resources and these like the types of relationships that are this really deep bond.
I've always associated the 8th house with what your partner or spouse leaves you with.
Yes.
Not necessarily
Inheritance.
Material. Yeah, not inheritance.
But,
yes. Not did he leave her in
No, but I'm just you're right. Not just the material inheritance.
No. It's she so what I'm seeing here is that she after he left her, she was in an immense amount of sadness and grief and confusion and chaos, disruption that transformed her. And Venus there too is probably the longing for the beauty that they had together on top of Pluto and Uranus. And Pluto stayed there for a long time as well, because Pluto transits, for those of you who don't know, like for example, Pluto is moving out, we're getting this boot off of our neck finally, right?
Thank God.
Pluto, how many years?
Well, 2008, so it's like 17 years.
Yeah,
16, 17
Pluto
years.
stays in signs for a long time, so I'm assuming since it was at 18 degrees, there were still many years after this that the grief still got to her.
For sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then she also had the transiting sun was going right over her natal Pluto
and natal Venus. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also there's Chiron there too.
Well, yeah. And and this is Chiron right now in the sky or at the time, and then this is her Saturn return. Right there.
Wow.
Not exact. It was like kind of leaving her Saturn return, but it's still present.
Well, the whatever was going on with her probably started, when they were together and everything. And if he died of liver failure, was that?
Yeah, liver cancer.
Was he must have been sick for a little while.
I'm not sure. I don't know how quickly it came on because everything I read was just he tragically passed. And it made it sound like it was more sudden, but he would have had to have been diagnosed. But I wonder how quickly the progression was.
Oh my gosh, that sounds awful. My husband and I are so close. I can't even imagine losing someone that's like your best friend, your partner, your soulmate, your everything that fast, especially after only being together for a couple of years.
And starting this family and all these beautiful things.
Yeah.
This is also interesting, the Black Moon Lilith conjunct transiting moon.
Or transiting moon, sorry, yeah. But in Sagittarius.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was like an insanely accurate reading for her and then we'll get into kind of why that's just so potent, let alone just the fact of his death. But she ended up taking a vow of celibacy. And after this, she decided she was done.
That'll do it.
And she had all of her, dark night of the soul, really intense, awful depression, dissociation. She would sit in meditation in like a trance-like state for 20 plus hours, which was obviously not a healthy thing.
Well,
Neglecting a lot of things.
That makes perfect sense though, because her Jupiter is in her 12th house in
Yeah.
Capricorn, and
If you're gonna meditate, you're gonna meditate.
Jupiter makes everything bigger that it touches.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna meditate, you're not gonna meditate just for like an hour. You're gonna meditate for 20 hours.
Totally. In the sign of Capricorn too, like the patience is there.
Yeah.
Patience is there.
Yeah.
And while that wasn't necessarily a healthy thing, later she attributed that to saving her life, and it's why a lot of the reason why she developed such a deep love for the practice. Because she said, I think it gave me freedom. I think it gave me my true independence, that no matter where I go in the world or whatever I do, whatever my involvement, I'm free, that the world cannot claim me anymore. I've been very close to the end of my life, and I feel that I've been given my freedom there.
That is so 12th house.
Yeah.
That is like literally, if I could find a quote that would describe Jupiter, especially in the 12th house, that would be it, because it would be kind of facing these awful things that are happening in your life and somehow pushing through and transcending them. And
Transcendent. You mentioned transcendent.
Yeah.
And the Jupiter, her Jupiter's at 17 degrees. That's forming a trine with that Pluto conjunct her Neptune at 18 degrees in Virgo. So
Trance.
Yeah, trance. And the trine adds this layer of, like all of this is awful and chaotic, but Jupiter trine in the 12th house is that element of transcendence of like, well, this is turning into something.
Yeah.
And I can get out of this. There's like an element of hope there.
And she also mentioned in that quote that you just said that she had come so close to death. And the 12th house is also death and dying.
Yeah.
The 8th and 12th house are death and dying.
Yeah.
So, wow, that's
Powerful stuff.
for real.
Well, and luckily, that wasn't forever. She had some great friends and family in her life, and she had a friend, I think it was a musical colleague, who recommended that she meet Swami Satchidananda and go to India, because they were like, I think this would be really good for you right now. Like, you need some help, clearly. And so she traveled to India in 1970, and she met Swami Satchidananda and Satchidananda. I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Satchidananda.
I was also looking at her 5th house, and there's nothing. That's children, right? There's nothing there. It's in Gemini, so
yeah. But everything I've seen, like, she had a good relationship with her kids.
Yeah.
Like her kids loved her, and like they made a whole website for her and her
they
legacy.
were really young too.
Yeah. And I think maybe after she got out of all of the dark night of the soul stuff, maybe because I did read when John was alive, she preferred to just be at home and be a mom. And I did read something about this. After he passed, she was in an interview. She mentioned that he had left an inheritance. That's actually funny now to bring it back to there. He left enough money that she didn't feel like she had to be out working all the time. And so she felt like she could just be at home and be a mom. And that's what she wanted to spend her time on a lot of the time. So I think there were definitely phases of that. And
maybe there were people there to support.
There
and
had
take
to have been
care.
people there to help, siblings or friends. But she ended up going to this guru. And
I just noticed this too. I'm sorry. I just noticed it's within 7 degrees, but there's almost an opposition between Jupiter, this transit with her Jupiter.
Yeah.
So in the 7th house of partnerships and marriage.
True. And this is pretty much opposite the sun, Pluto, and everything.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So she goes to India in 1970. She meets Swami Satchidananda, and she decides there that she's going to devote the rest of her life to God, but particularly to expressing the divine through music. And it's here that she takes on the name Turiyasangitinanda, which means, and it's Sanskrit for Transcendental Lord's highest song of bliss.
Wow.
So this becomes her name. And she moves to California, where she establishes a Vedantic center in San Francisco.
Oh, really?
which we need to go
We
to.
gotta go.
Yeah. Also, the San Francisco thing is crazy because in season 1 of Coven, there were so many people. Any of the modern people that we covered had some like connection to San Francisco, and I had no idea.
We
at
love
the
you, San
time.
Francisco.
We do. I had no idea at the time that I was going to be moving here. Yeah, and so it's crazy that she also has a San Francisco connection. It's like this is truly like a vortex for some revolutionary shit.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Obviously.
we're here.
Obviously. So she establishes a Vedantic center, and then eventually the Shanti Anantam ashram in Malibu. So this is when she becomes
Malibu. That's different from San Francisco.
Yeah, well, and I think there's another one in the like Santa Monica.
Sierra's saying yes.
Interesting. Wow. I didn't know she was such a big like figure in the spiritual community. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize it was LA. That is Malibu, I guess, in that area. Yeah, that makes sense. And her spirituality, I think, would be a really comforting place to go for, one, musicians, but two, people who aren't comfortable with the language of like organized religion, because she's so like syncretic, or she's so like syncretic. Is that the word I'm looking for?
What,
syncretic in that way, like combining many. She's a syncretist. Oh. I learned this word actually from another person that we covered on the podcast. Syncretism. But yeah, I think she's syncretic.
Like she blends,
blending different spiritual traditions and beliefs.
Yeah.
Even though she was a Swamini, so like a Hindu spiritual leader,
That makes. Sorry, I was just looking at her 8th house again, and because when I think about blending, I think about Neptune and I think about Pisces, and Neptune in the 8th house is literally like
melting the walls.
Yeah,
they're dissolving the.
Yes, exactly. The boundaries, dissolving the boundaries. Yeah.
Quite literally dissolving the boundaries.
Yeah, and I was just looking to see where her Saturn is, and
Aries 3rd house. That is about like communication and independence with thought and expression, and it's being very like into your immediate community.
Yeah, and there's also like structure in organized religions, and I'm assuming that if you could sit for 20 hours meditating, that you would probably be very good with structure in your life.
Totally. Yeah. I also have my Saturn in the early degrees of Aries, and so it was interesting to kind of read her story coming up on my Saturn return.
Oh yeah.
And to kind of see how she like went through that, and just the ways that it shaped her, and how she kind of does embody that independence but still communal, because my Saturn's actually in my 9th house, because I'm a Leo rising, so opposite of that. So it's interesting. But anyway, so after this whole like spiritual awakening, she records and releases her album Journey to Sachidananda, which is the name of her guru that she met, and releases it in 1971, all inspired by her experiences with him. And that I think is regarded as her like big work that is like very influential, very impactful. It's like the one, but all of her work is insane. And I did, in researching for this, I had a night where I just put on her music and I didn't do anything else, and I just listened to it all the way through, and it was quite transcendental. It was quite highly recommend.
Did you get into a meditative state?
I was pretty meditative. It was really interesting to notice like what things come up. She was really inspired by like Stravinsky and like the Rite of Spring. She references a lot, and so there's a lot.
What was the music like?
There's a lot of music. I mean, it's like it uses a lot of instrumentals that you would expect from like Hindu, like spiritual, like of like the 70s, like that. You know, the what's the instrument I'm thinking of? Josh, our audio engineer would know what to say here.
We're getting the thumbs up from. Are you talking about the? It's like a guitar, but it's not.
It's not like a sitar. It's not like, but it's like a. What is the word I'm looking for? It's not a harp. Anyway, you know, it sounds very like spiritual. But then there's also like this really crazy avant-garde mix of like kind of like Rite of Spring. If you've ever listened to Rite of Spring, it's really uncomfortable because it's the intention is to take you to that place of discomfort. And then she takes you out of it too. And so you're listening to all of these things that are very dissonant and atonal and things that are clashing, and they just shouldn't be together.
It reminds me of literally like what she was probably going through when she lost the love of her life and all of the chaos and the discomfort and having to push through that. That's what we talk about with the 12th house too, right? Where we have to go to those dark places, but then we come out on the other side, and then we're in a better place than we were before, hopefully, and we can look back on those times and see them as transformative, and they might have been excruciatingly uncomfortable at the moment, but when we come out of them, we're like, right?
Breath of fresh air, better for it, hopefully. Not all the time, but I think most of the time, and in her case, I think she definitely would say that. And this album and all of her music, she wanted it to be like a tool to help in meditation and a tool to help people.
I'm gonna have to check that out tonight on the drive home.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and it's beautiful too. Like it's not all that dissonant,
right,
avant-garde kind of sound. It's a nice mix of that, and then this like really soothing. And it's jazz too at the end of the day. And she also after his passing, after John's passing, she's releasing her own music, but she's doing a lot of shows. She's playing a lot of tribute shows. And participating in a lot of interviews about his life. So her image at this point is not really about her own music. It's a lot overshadowed by his death and honoring his legacy and continuing on his name. But she's not upset about this. She's not like, I think it does sound in her interviews like she's a little bit like, yeah, I have my own thing that I'm doing, but it doesn't sound like she's like bitter or salty about it. She's just like, yeah, he was amazing and he deserves to be honored, and I'm honored to be able to continue
That's awesome.
sharing this. And she continued to make music and do these shows up until 1978, when she pulls away from the public and decides to focus on her spiritual work in her Vedanta centers. Okay, but let's talk about her influence and her later life. So she stopped playing and she stopped being public with her music in 1978. Doesn't mean that she stopped making music. She was still making music, but it was all mostly focused on in her spiritual centers and in her like people, her congregations. And posthumously, posthumously, her family released some of this music. And so there's an album called The Ecstatic Music of Alice Coltrane Turiyasangitinanda. Saying her name 5 times fast is a fun
I think you're doing great.
Experiment.
Something that you just said, sorry, really fast. I was just like looking at her chart again, and Mars in the 11th house. I was just thinking about like these centers that she had, right? So she opened initiatory energy with Mars, and these centers of philosophy and religion.
Sagittarius and the North Node being
truth
like
seeking, and her midheaven
in the 11th house of the community and
people, peers, groups. Yep.
And she passed away January 12th, 2007, which I thought was crazy when I learned, because this episode is coming out January 11th.
Oh.
our first episode, January 11th, and she passed her day of leaving her earthly body, is how they put it, was January 12th. So that feels pretty aligned.
Yeah.
But anyway, a decade after her passing, this album comes out, and it was recorded music from her congregations. And this music, you should also listen to this music, because this music is insane. It is a wild thing to listen to. I'd never heard anything like it. It's like traditional Sanskrit chants and mantras, and so it's like sounds like you think it's just like a traditional like Hindu spiritual chant, but it's original compositions, and then it has gospel roots and classical training with dynamic avant-garde harmonics.
Oh my gosh, I've got to listen to
It's
this.
like you're listening to a Hindu, like Sanskrit chanted gospel music. It's really insane, and people are like clapping and dancing and like singing as if you're in a church in the South singing gospel music.
I love it.
And Jules Evans again comments on the musical syncretism of her sound in the record. And he says, it mixes Indian Sanskrit chanting with jazz, soul, African spirituals, sci-fi synthesizers, and even house music.
Whoa!
He said, it's both universal and unique. It's the transcendental one. It's Alice.
Oh, wow. Definitely transcendental. Yeah.
Yeah, the transcendental one. And so her music has and continues to influence so many legendary artists over the years, including Radiohead. Often,
I could see that. I could totally see that.
Mentions her, Flying Lotus, Paul Weller, and then the harpist Brandy Younger, who played on records with Common, Lauryn Hill,
Yeah.
and John Legend, and so many more. And she attributes Alice because she was first, like one of the first, if not the first, in the public eye, African-American woman to play harp. Brandy talks about how influential and important that is. Mm-hmm. In 2004, she released the album Translinear Light, and after 25 years away, she returned to the stage in fall of 2006, culminating on November 4th with a concert for the San Francisco Jazz Festival. And I have the chart for that.
Let me see.
I accidentally made it November 2nd, but most of it's the same. The moon will just be a little bit later into Aries. This is also why I made her an Aquarius rising, because her return to stage after 25 years has all of that 10th house energy.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. Yeah. So it's like finally she is not in the shadow when she's doing
literal
this.
sun and midheaven conjunct in the 10th house, bringing the light through the shadow.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Shining a light on her beauty, her ability to communicate, her transcendence, her drive. Yeah, because she's got Mars, the sun, midheaven, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter all transiting that house.
And all pretty close orbits, too. I mean, there's the Jupiter and Mars are like 6 degrees and 25. That's the furthest, but everything else is pretty close
That's crazy.
together.
Wow.
And you have to remember that she passed away on January 12th, 2007. So it was just a few months later. And all of this in Scorpio in her 10th house to me is like the legacy she left on the world. What she provided, what she gave was kind of all accumulated in this performance.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing.
So
I don't even
welcome,
know.
Alice.
Yes, welcome, Alice, to our coven.
Yeah, I highly recommend listening to her music and watching these documentaries. We'll link all of our sources to things so you all will be able to find these. She's just an incredible woman, and everybody who had anything to say about her was just how amazing she is and she was, and how full of love she was, and just to everyone how much compassion people would say that it was, you could tell when you're around her, it was like you were in the presence of divinity.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
So
fantastic.
yeah. Thank you, Alice.
Yes,
for joining us. Excited to, I absolutely fell in love with her researching her. But
I know, I can't wait to listen to her music and see her with the rest of the people.
See how our Coven lineup starts to grow. Right now it's just Alice playing some beautiful harp in the corner, probably setting us all into a trance as we transcend together into the next person. And I am so excited to hear your person next week.
Yes. Well,
do you have any? This is something that I forgot to mention to you. So kind of putting you on the spot, but we used to do hints. So do you have any hints without giving anything away?
Okay, let's see. A hint. I can't think of anything right now. Okay, hold on.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Give me a second. This person also has a lot of transformative qualities, and I can't wait for you to see where this, I can't wait to hear what you see in their chart. Yeah, as far as the transformation
wonderful
part of them. So
I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yay!
Right, awesome.
Episode 1.
Yes.
Season 2.
Yes.
Complete.
Amazing.
Coco did a wonderful job. Everybody tell Coco that she did a great job.
I need it because I'm Leo rising, so the sun rules my chart.
We need the validation, both of us. So actually, please don't be mean to us. Just kidding. If you hate us, that's okay. We'll get over it.
Yeah.
Bye.